Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. The Raben Group is beyond honored to have two of the most talented leaders in the nation in conversation with an incredibly informed audience about where we are and where we're going with respect to all of the incredible attacks and terrible things happening in the nation. We are less interested in hand-wringing and pointing out how unfair or mean many of the things that we face are, and we're much more interested in what are we doing? How are we taking care of ourselves? How are we organizing on strategy and tactics and messaging? And we hope that you will benefit from a beautifully curated conversation where you can get some judgment and thoughts and the opportunity to interact. So thank you, Drs. Besser and Power, for your day in and day out work with your organizations and in the ecosystem in which you are tremendous leaders. And I'm going to turn it over to my fantastic colleague, managing principal at Raben, Whitney Tome, to engage us in a great conversation. Thanks all for joining.
Thank you, Robert. So as Robert said, I'm Whitney Tome, one of the managing principals at Raben, and I run the culture, strategy, and organizational design practice. And I mean, honestly, today is like my favorite kind of day because I get to hang out with two very, very cool people. So I am very excited about the conversation we're going to have. And I'm just going to put a few disclaimers at the top and then we'll dive in. So first off, we are recording, so for posterity and future generations to take the wisdom and brilliance from these two. Next, if you have questions for them, I will be taking them close to the close of this conversation, so please put them in the Q&A and I will get to them as we go. And then lastly, enjoy this moment and hopefully let your shoulders drop a little bit as you step into this conversation. Despite the freneticness that this country is bringing us at this moment, hopefully you can take a little solace from your Monday morning and step into a little bit of hopefully thought-provoking and insightful conversation. And I'll focus on a couple of things, which is the two people in front of me, but also the topic before us, which is really, what do you do when you don't know what to do, right? And in this moment, a lot of people are like, what are we doing? What's going on? What are I, right? And take a moment and be like, all right, hold on, calm down, relax. As my youngest child would say, just breathe, we'll be fine. And we keep it moving. But to really think about, okay, when you're in a moment of incredible uncertainty, how do you turn that uncertainty into action? And not just say like, okay, what am I doing? But what can I do? What does it look like? How do I support both myself and my people? And especially as leaders of institutions, what does that mean? What does that look like? What do people need to hear from you? What do you need to say? But also, where do you need to listen? And so we're hoping to cover a lot of that over the course of the next hour. But let me introduce the two incredible people I have before me. So one is Dr. Richard Besser, who's the president and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And what I want to sort of impress upon is both Dr. Besser, if you all don't know, is a pediatrician by training, but has spent a lot of time both at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, so he knows what it's like to live and work in government, but also prevent us from the complications of health. But also now leading the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is really shifting that institution to having health be a right. Let me say that again, health be a right. So it's an exciting, I think, opportunity to think about what the values are when it comes to health and health equity. So welcome, Dr. Besser.
Thank you.
Also with me is Angelique Power, who's the president and CEO of the Skillman Foundation. And for those of you who might not know this, and I loved learning this, is that Angelique is also an incredible artist. She has an MFA, for those of you who don't know, and is a wonderful both writer, poet, along with other skills that she has, but is really leading the Skillman Foundation focused on the youth in Detroit and on education. So, what does it really look like to support, empower, and build the next generation of leaders from the children that sit and live in the wonderful state of Michigan? So, I'm going to dive in. Thank you for joining us, Angelique.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start with a what sounds like a very basic question, and I know Robert will probably fault me for doing this, but like, how are the two of you actually doing in this moment as like people with the identities you hold as the leaders of institutions? How are you? Angelique, you want to
I'll,
start?
I'll go first. I'm all right. I'm okay. And I think, first of all, acknowledging we're coming off of a weekend where we saw, across the globe, people gather uh, and speak, use their voice and express themselves. We saw folks that were veterans. We saw folks that were in rural areas. We saw folks across cities, really saying, like, this is our country and this is what this moment means. And I think that echoes how I feel in this moment. Like, and we'll talk more about it. Like, it's not blind enthusiasm, but I think that I feel aligned and I feel in solidarity with so many wonderful others. And I feel like I'm living on purpose in this moment. And so I am okay.
Thank you, Angelique. Rich?
Uh, on the professional side, I feel that same sense of purpose. That I feel so incredibly fortunate to be working at an institution where I can stand up and say, "This is not okay." For my own mental health, for the health of the people who work at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, there is incredible power in being able to stand up and lean into our values and say this is not okay. So on the professional side, I'm feeling good, and the same glimmers of hope where you're seeing resistance pop up in many different places now is really encouraging. On a personal side, I recognize how fortunate I am given my life situation, but I'm tired, and I find it hard to turn it off. And I have to. We're going to talk about that, but I really have to be intentional about putting some guardrails on what we're experiencing, as a nation and as a world.
Thank you both for that. Angelique, were you going to say something? So I'd like to move on to like, okay, so how are you doing? But how are your teams doing? How, as leaders, are you supporting, managing not only your, sort of immediate leadership or executive teams, but the whole institution in this moment? Rich?
Um, I we were ready with the election to for a number of different outcomes, but we were ready to declare right away that we were not changing our focus and our mission, that our commitment to a future where health is not a privilege but a right, our commitment to addressing the biggest barriers to health, in particular structural racism, that was not going to change. And why a commitment to a culture of belonging internally and to diversity, equity, inclusion was essential to our work. And so we hit the ground with that right away. And that was really important to our staff to hear that we were not going to do duck and cover on our work or on our values. We were gonna stand up strong. So that being said, I'm seeing from staff a lot of gratitude for that, and from grantees as well. But on the other side of it, we have 320 people who work at the foundation. who have all kinds of different lived experiences. And this moment is hitting each and every person at the foundation differently. Some based on who's in their family, some based on their identity, but to a person. And so we are trying to over communicate. I don't know that you can over communicate at this moment, but we're trying to communicate big time so that staff know what's going on. And I ran emergency preparedness at CDC for 4 years, and one of the things that I learned about crisis communication is that it's very hard to retain information, and the amount of information you can take in at any one time is much smaller. So repetition is really important, and trying to model for staff the self-care that you're hoping that they will lean into as well.
Thank you, Rich. Angelique?
So I started at Skillman in 21, and that process, I spent a year in community listening, and my staff, it started out just for me, but then my staff came with me, and we were still like in the haze of COVID. And so coming out of it, it actually helped us all to be together and to reconnect with each other. And through that listening, we heard a lot about Detroit and about education and about philanthropy and about systems change work. And from there, we co-built with a lot of the ideas and a lot of the folks from that year-long listening tour, we co-built a strategy that was the 1-2 punch of being deeply embedded and grassroots focused, and then also being focused on that chess game of policy and grass tops. So our strategy is 4 parts. It's deeply embedded in organizing. It's deeply embedded in policy advocacy. The third part is building common ground across difference. And there's so much difference all the time. And then the fourth part is like, come correct, like show up as a racially equitable grant maker, be accountable. And I have said to my board and staff, if we did not have that strategy, in November, we would have had to pivot and create it then, because we need to be deep in community listening, moving collectively. We need to understand the chessboard that is being played rapidly. We're in speed chess mode right now. And we also need to like really expand our minds to think about like, who are people that we need to link arms with that maybe we haven't linked arms with before? And how do we stick to our values around racial equity? So I feel that the staff is just like Rich said, like this is a lot, and we're all having our middle of the night moments. We're all trying to explain this to the youngest around us and to ourselves. And so that doesn't change. But the fact that we have spent 3+ years rooting ourselves in this work, the work has never been clearer of what needs to be done. And so the staff, I think, is aligned, and I think that they're, just like I'm okay, I think they're okay.
You both talked about rooting in values. And for me, that's the place where often organizations need to start, but often sort of lose sight of in this moment. And I'd love to hear from both of you, what does that rooting in values really mean? But also then how is it being demonstrated in the decisions and actions that each of you are taking? Angelique, you want to start us off?
Sure. Part of this process also that we went through was to look at our mission and our vision and values. And often those are things that are sort of like dusty on the shelves, and you kind of know what they are, but we like to we focus on education and education policy. So we like to make learning a key part of everything we do. We have a deep learning culture. We are very competitive. We like to have fun with it. And so we have actually spent the last few years ensuring everybody knows what our values are. Like, what are the values? What's the mission? Like, you get beads thrown at you, in meetings. And so it's something that we work on making sure that we're living. And then we actually use our values as a rubric. So we have an individual award program called the Skillman Visionary Awards for incredible people across Detroit that are working on education systems change. And the idea is really to show that, systems change is this big, overused word, but it's actually like people who are working at a systems level. And to help us decide with the confidential nominators every year, we actually use our values. That's the rubric that helps us make decisions. I have written something that I'm going to send out tomorrow or Wednesday that is about this moment, that's called the values test. And I do think for those of us that are sort of trying to navigate right now, that's the compass, It's like, what are your values? Pull them out and put them in front of you. And that's going to help you know, like, where do you shift and where do you not shift? This isn't a purity test. This isn't like hang on to anything and don't refuse to change, but it is a values test. And I think that that's a incredible tool right now to help us make sense.
Thank you for that, Angelique. I'm looking forward to that. Rich, please.
Yeah, I find that in times of stress, in times of great challenge, having clear values makes the navigating of the moment much easier. And we have a set of guiding principles that we developed. The latest version when I first came to the foundation almost eight years ago, and they've held up really well. We're gonna retool them probably, but they've held up very well. They center equity in everything that we do. We have a principle that we value data and evidence openly debated. We will be good stewards of the resources entrusted to us, which is helping us ensure that everything that we do is aligned to our mission, to our strategy. We value diversity. We treat everyone with fairness and respect, and we speak out for what we believe. And I just find in this moment, looking to make sure that we're holding true to every single one of those has been really, it makes it easy because it's a roadmap, and everyone in the staff, when they come, they have these, they're framed, they're sitting on their desk. And we'll debate them and look at them and see how do we need to update them. But it's, if you don't have values, it sure is easy to capitulate in this moment, given all of the pressures to do so.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to sort of drill down on a little bit that you both are talking about is values, but right, the difference between capitulation versus knowing what the behavior looks like, right? It's sort of a subtle distinction, but a really important one that we're watching, right? As you both probably know, I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm watching the legal field with great both trepidation, but also excitement at the same time. And so, values are sort of written on a page, but when they come to life, right, that's really where you know. And I love, Angelique, your example of like we use the values as a test, right? For like, how do we pick the awards? How do we make decisions? And I'd love to hear from you all around like, is there a priority in values, or are they all consistently, right? Like sort of applied equally? And how do they help you navigate the like, is a value more important in this moment because it is being challenged? Or is it like, no, all of them are still equal? And I'd love to hear a little bit more around how you all are navigating that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so one of our values is listeners and learners. Like, that is who we are. We're not experts, we're listeners and learners. Another is like accountable to each other. And then one is youth driven. And so that's something where we have Gen Z, we have some Gen Zers on our board. We have a youth council that makes grant making decisions. Often if I'm invited to speak, I will suggest a young person who is smarter than I am goes instead of me or comes with me. And there's a lot of things that are happening right now that cannot be youth driven. And so it is one of those things where you ask yourself about like these moments, and you know that you want youth to be at the table, not having decisions made for them, but to be part of the decision-making process. And there's also a blitz of policies that are coming that need to like move really fast. Another one of our values is racially equitable and justice focused. And so this is a moment where, you know, full disclosure, we work with Raben Group and we leverage your legal expertise, Whitney, to look at everything that is like on our website and everything that we're doing. And, you know, I think that we've asked ourselves like, okay, where are places that we could be more inclusive in our language? Where are places that like we're saying things because when we wrote them and threw them up, we were like, that sounds good. But now that we're like in this moment, does that fully define everything that we're doing? And how do we then say, okay, that doesn't go against our values to make this more inclusive language. So let's actually be clearer and use this opportunity to be clearer. Now, are we going to take racial equity off of our website? No. Are we going to stop saying that that's what we're about? No, because that goes against our values. And so I think that, you know, if that's a good example, those are some of the ways that, and that's what I mean by not a purity test. We're not in it to be like, we are rigid and we are not changing. We are all making sense of this moment. We're also taking the fight to where we have firm footing, which is our values. And that's like, we're not going to just have a fight come at us in any different way. We're going to take to the fight exactly where we are mission-based and values-focused.
Thank you, Angelique. Rich, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any one of the values that supersedes another. Each one gets challenged by different things coming. So, when the administration very early on made CDC databases disappear, well, that challenged challenged the work of a lot of our grantees in health. But the idea of data and evidence, openly debated, is a little hard when the data is gone. And so, that pushed us into doing work to try and save the data and make it available in other ways. Treating people with fairness and respect. When the administration has tried to eliminate transgender people from society, that's a full-on assault. And so you take action. You don't say that that's okay. The being good stewards of our resources. Well, we're a foundation that looks to exist in perpetuity. But in this moment, what does that mean? It means that you look to not leave any impact on the table, and you look to see what can you do in this moment, because what does perpetuity mean if our democracy goes away? And then the speaking out for what we believe. When I pitched myself for this job based on speaking out. I had been at ABC News for 8 years, and I said, if people cared what the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation thought about things, we would have a much better opportunity to shift policy than if no one knows what the foundation is. And so I came in with that mindset. So for me, it's a little challenging because several times a day there's something that is a full-on assault to something that we value, and you can't speak out on. You have to pick where you're going to speak out, or you become noise. But it's for us, and it's been one of the areas that we've leaned into in a really big way.
Wonderful. Thank you both for that. I'd like to drill down a little bit, Angelique. You started this earlier of like, how you're preparing your boards. To really think about, having the staff prepared is one thing. Technically you see them every day or see them in the office or the building, But your boards are a different beast, right? Where you sort of see them episodically, but they're the governance structure, they're the oversight, they're the accountability. How are you preparing them for this moment so that you as a leader can make those decisions in the moment, knowing that they've got your back?
I love this question. And, you know, anyone who leads any organization that has a board spends a tremendous amount of time thinking about how do you engage the board and get the most out of the board, so that it isn't like a platitudinal or performative, but it is actually this like very mutually beneficial relationship. You know, I talked earlier about how we were changing our strategy, and in any strategy that focuses on supporting like movement building and grassroots, as well as grass tops, and trying to do it in a purple state in Detroit that has a history of many things being done to it, like policy and philanthropy and, you know, public sector. You have to prepare a board for risk. And so, um, you know, the conversation actually started a while ago in December 23 before we rolled out our new strategy. And I was thinking to myself, because the type of learning that we try to do with our staff, we try to bring to the boardroom. You know, we sent out a lot of material, like our board book sometimes is like 300 pages, and that's one. There might be like a couple. So I'm just gonna say they may not be reading like the entire thing. I'm just gonna say that. Um, and so I started doing pop quizzes that I would say, like, this is gonna be on the quiz and open book, you know, but I have a competitive board. So they loved it. They were like, I wanna, you know, do well. So for the risk appetite, what I wanted to do was to confront the thing that happens in boardrooms, which is you bring these brilliant people into the room because of their life experience or their work experience, and you want them to like connect and enmesh themselves in the organization's mission and vision and strategy, and then like plug their greatness into this you know, sort of rooted strategy. But often what happens is the strategy is sort of like underneath, and then someone in the room who's super influential, super smart or charismatic or has influence, they may drive the conversation in different ways. And I think that's why in many of these institutions, you feel a tension between staff and board. And, you know, you're trying to always mitigate what that tension is. So I wanted to do a risk appetite exercise that was engaging, that would gamify our learning, and that would also take perspectives of the board and put it in aggregate so that one person's voice wasn't like ruling all. So we did an exercise. We created it based on like the BuzzFeed quiz, which Golden Girl are you? And we chose these avatars from around Detroit. We chose to symbolize risk. We chose a conservatory we're here to protect and nourish. We chose a sculpture that was a puzzle piece we're here to bridge. And we chose the Joe Louis Fist, where if you haven't been to Detroit, first of all, you should come to Detroit. But if you haven't been to Detroit, this is a huge sculpture in the middle of our city. And we did it with staff first, and then we did it with board. And we found out in December 2023, we are all the same avatar, which is the Joe Louis Fist. The board was a little closer to the bridging, as they should be. And the staff was all the way like in a fight outside of the boardroom, you know, but that was right too. We just redid that exercise though, last week, last Tuesday. And this time we brought Joe Louis back as an avatar and we trained him for this moment with actual risks that are coming our way. Frivolous audits, CEOs of foundations being called in front of Congress for public flogging and ritual humiliation, you know, fines and, you know, allegations of illegal discrimination, et cetera. And went through the process of saying, like, where do we defend and where do we study the move and where do we punch back? And I'm so happy to say that staff and board were completely aligned with exact situations of where to go. And it allowed for us to bring an aggregate voice, an avatar, and a posture that we can take. So I think that we all have to get creative, but we cannot be ahead of the board on this. We have to be in sync.
That's wonderful, Angelique. That's great. Rich.
That sounds like a great exercise. Yeah.
I'll, I'll send it your way.
Yeah. So, our board, I have an amazing board. And it's a board that has been moving along as we have as a foundation in our focus initially around broadly community conditions and their connection to health, to a focus on health equity, who has opportunity, what are the barriers to health, to in 2020 with COVID and the disparate impact on communities of color and the murder of George Floyd and this national reckoning around racism, an explicit focus in the foundation on the connection between structural racism and health. And with that, we did a lot of board learning, a lot of intentional, we took a whole year working with some outside consultants to learn how to talk about things that in America, people across racial groups don't talk about, race and racism and how that shows up. And the board leaned in hard. And so when this moment arrived, the board was in really good shape. We had been talking for a year and a half about the upcoming election and potential and what risks could be, and our work and our board. Last year in April, we took our board to Montgomery and visited the 3 sites of the Equal Justice Initiative. And our board came together and made a statement of support for our work focused on structural racism, which was just amazing. And so we're meeting in about 2 weeks, and we're going to be doing risk exercises as well. But what the board said to me in October ahead of the election was be bold, be bolder. We have a new brand that we launched last year that says we take bold steps to transform health in our lifetime, working with others towards a future where health is no longer a privilege but a right. And what they've said to me over and over again is be bolder, be bolder. And that is just so empowering. And I know that that's not, Angelique and I both meet with others in philanthropy, and it's not the same experience everywhere by any means. But we have a new board chair, Starsky Wilson, who's a civil rights leader and just awesome. And we're coming together in 2 weeks. And yes, we're going to talk about risk, but we're going to be talking about how do we be bolder in this moment, which it gives me some chills. It just feels terrific about it.
That's wonderful from both of you. I'd love to hear, and I'm going to transition a little from the board into the staff and sort of organizational culture at this moment, which is recognizing that, to your point earlier, Rich, you got your staff who might have family members who are undocumented, right? Might have other, threats to their existence, for lack of a better word, or the people that they care and love. And so how are you, especially as leaders, attending to and getting a real sense of both the organizational culture as it is now, but also what does your staff need to hear from you in these moments? Rich, you want to start us off?
Yeah, it's challenging, and it's something that I wrestle with. I have incredible privilege, as an older straight white man of means in this position. I know that I have opportunities to use my voice that some of my colleagues do not, where there is much greater personal risk. I also know that by speaking out, it may draw some more attention to us as an institution. And I know for some staff, that raises the question, will I have a job? What's going to happen? And I still think that there's no protection in silence, and that what will ensure our ability to do this work going forward is stepping up and saying no, and others stepping up and saying no, and banding together to say no. And so I do think for the good, for the well-being of our staff, that is the best tactic, the best approach. And I also think for their in general mental health, the fact that we're standing up and speaking out is a good thing. And we're also, letting our staff know that we are here for them if they get into situations based on their personal identities and such that become challenging.
Thank you. Angelique.
Yeah, I think they need to know the truth, which, is somehow being so obfuscated. It is its own currency now. So I don't think it's a time to smile, offer like a saccharine smile, and then like go in your office and shut the door and like freak out, I think that staff need to know like how you are wrestling and how you are making sense of this very complicated moment. I think staff need to know that we are totally in this together, that they are not on their own figuring this out. I think that they need a lighthouse. Rich and I were just in a conversation about being a lighthouse. I think they need that instead of a siren or an alarm. I think that they need to know they are in the exact right place at the exact right time. Like this is why they're here, and they actually get the opportunity to work on this. That these are things we're all waking up in the night worrying about, but they get to come in and they get to try to change it, which is honestly a gift. I think they need to know how to protect themselves. And I think they need to know how to protect the foundation. And I think they need to know how to protect our partners in community right now. I think they need to know their students, and that we're all like running to catch up. I feel like I should be getting a law degree, on constitutional law. But we're all learning right now, and it's okay. You're not expected to know, you're just expected to study and to bring what you've learned forward. I think they need to know that equity is working. And that's why we have this huge backlash against it. We had diversity and inclusion for 50 years, and it was like, slowly, but equity, we have that loud and proud, and then we have this backlash. It's because it's working. And so they need to know. And I said this in the meeting with Rich and I were in, there is no shame in your game. They need to know that. What we are doing is what we are put on this earth to do. They need to know that our ancestors have walked this path before us, and that we are walking the path that they laid, and we are making a path for our grandchildren. They need to know all of that.
Thank you, Angelique, especially for the lighthouse reference. I don't know if either of you know this, but I actually started my career as an environmental policy wonk and spent a lot of time on fisheries. And so the lighthouse for me has always been that spot, both for fishermen, but for anyone who's closer, loves the water, it is the place that you go to when you know that you will be safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to think about lighthouses in that way. So thank you, Angelique, for that. It's a wonderful reminder of both the places that exist, but also the places that we are creating in this moment to be those lighthouses. So I'm going to start transitioning us to a few, hopefully, questions from the audience, because we've got some really wonderful ones. But I'm going to ask you one more question before I transition to that, which is, what is one thing you feel like you have done in the last let's say, month or two that feels like you've actually like spurred some action, whether that's speaking out, whether that is making a decision, whether that is helping colleagues to make a decision. What do you feel like you've done that has taken this level of like sort of fraughtness, uncertainty, or just like, oh, that just feels icky, or just like I'm unclear, that you've been like, yep, I know exactly what to do with that, or at least I can help you know what to do with that? Angelique?
I think, I'm looking at Rich because I think of Rich as a lighthouse also in this. And I think of Skillman spoke out early about this, and so did Robert Wood Johnson. And I think of that moment. My incredible communications person, Natalie, who already, I said one thing about a blog I'm doing and she already like put it in this chat. She's like on it. But she and I had like a very real talk about sending out something so early on. Um, and made the decision that although it was risky, it was the right thing that we needed to do. And so one, I think showing up and being vocal, and two, not fronting, like talking about the twin companions of hope and fear. That is how we're navigating all of this. We're not like brazen and blind faith, and it is a very scary moment. But befriending that fear and moving forward with the hope. And that's how I think we're showing up at Skillman, as whole, real humans inside of an institution who believe in what we do and are scared but hopeful at the same time. I think that that's probably the best that I've heard, at least from people across the country, that it meant something to them.
Rich?
I saw Skillman speaking out very quickly, which was awesome. And for me, the speaking out has given me a lot of strength, and what I've heard from our grantees and others, that it's given them strength and room to move and do their work and know that we're here. We're not going anywhere. We're providing cover, and so for me, that would be the biggest piece. And I mean, the day after Robert Kennedy was nominated for secretary, we had an op-ed out as to why that was bad for health. And right after President Trump issued all the executive orders, we put something out decrying his use of civil rights language with executive orders that were racist. And so that's the one for me as well.
Wonderful. I'm going to transition to a few wonderful questions we've gotten in the chat. And one is more focused on sort of philanthropy, because I have both of you as philanthropic leaders, and knowing that philanthropy is likely under attack soon enough. And someone was asking, are you all at all concerned about philanthropy as sort of both the sort of grander institution, but also sort of individually, right, as like your tax status and other things in this moment? And what does it mean for, to your point earlier, Rich, around like perpetuity? What does that even mean or look like in this moment? Rich, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, we do scenario planning. We look at what the various options may be, things that have been floated, and look at what that would mean in terms of our payout and future and such. And with certain combinations of changes, we would no longer look to exist in perpetuity. And we talk about, wow, we could do some real good as a spend down. So just trying to move away from the fear of that. And it's like, no, we would like to exist in perpetuity, because I believe there will always be issues that will benefit by having the foundation. But if that's not going to happen, we've got a lot of resources to do some good on the way out. And to me, that was very liberating, to just get that out of my head that, oh, we're gonna take actions to try and prevent that from happening in terms of being quiet and move, anything that would move away from our values. It's just like, no, we're going to lean in. And if that happens, but at the same time, you know, I hope that as a sector, we perform better than the academic sector, the legal sector, where, you know, when someone was attacked, we haven't seen them band together. Philanthropy, we are all hoping that when someone gets attacked, because it's going to happen, we come together and we all stand up and say, no, we're in solidarity. This is wrong. And I believe we will do better.
Good. Angelique, any other thoughts to this?
I mean, I think we know, and Rich and I have been in rooms where we've said this, like, we're not really interested in protecting the philanthropic sector. We're interested in protecting the nonprofit sector and protecting people in communities and in neighborhoods across the country. That's the role that we are gifted in philanthropy, that we get to be in proximity and that we get to fund. And so, you know, if anyone is prepared and resourced up to subsume those blows, it is philanthropy. And many of us are lockstep in solidarity, ready to do that. I think that there are uh, the reputational like punches that are coming, the real hits that are coming to CEOs. You know, that's what people should be waiting for. Like, it's just like the NGO story that we're suddenly hearing of, rhetoric of like how NGOs are wasting money and are, you know, a scam. Um, they're using the term NGO, the less known international term, for a beloved nonprofit sector, because we know nonprofits are, you know, the folks that work there are overworked and underpaid, and they do it all for mission. That's the real story. And if you're taking away government support and you're taking away the superheroes in all of our communities, you better believe philanthropy is going to stand up and stand together and link arms and try to stop that. So that, I think that's the fight that we're ready to go forward with.
Wonderful. There's another question related to sort of how are you encouraging solidarity, right? You sort of talked about it in philanthropy, so thank you for that. But I'd also love to hear how you all are thinking about this for your grantees, right? Of knowing that if attacks come, some of them are going to be similarly situated or can actually hand off things to each other. And so how are you also supporting, thinking about, and convening grantees to be able to pull together that same level of solidarity? Angelique, you want to start us off?
Yeah, we're doing this regularly. Every month we do Common Grounds. Sarita Scott is the incredible VP of program here, Punitha Thurman, the incredible VP of strategy. They put this together and they pull in folks. Actually, Whitney, you were the guest speaker at the last one, advising a room full of nonprofits about what they need to think about legally right now. What are all of the things that are coming out and what do they need to know? And just answering questions. And so every month, you know, here we host coffee and conversation and process it together. It's extremely important.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing more communication with our grantees than usual. We've set up a couple mechanisms for emergency funds for grantees to be able to meet some of the physical security needs, the legal risks. It's an area where I think that we want to do more. Clearly, it's not a one size fits all in terms of risk and legal needs. But one of the things that gives me some joy is that we've, between 2020 and now, we have funded a lot of organizations in the democracy space. So we have quite a number of grantees who have been filing lawsuits and pushing back and having success. And what I think is really important in a moment like this is lifting up those moments of success, so that you know, as an antidote to kind of the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness that you can get if you spend much time with the newspaper, if you've got one physically, or watching the news on TV.
Rich, thank you for that. One of the other questions we received was around optimism and sort of what keeps you optimistic, both professionally and personally. I think a lot of people are struggling with that, like, how do I keep joy, right, in these moments? And so, what are you two doing to try to keep that at the forefront rather than getting sort of bogged down in the, doom scrolling that I could easily do along with everybody else on a regular basis? Rich, you want to start us off?
Well, yeah, I think that it's really important to embrace joy and not to feel guilty about having moments of joy at a time when there is so much to say to not be joyful about. I limit my exposure to news in a big way. Uh, I worked in news for a long time, and I know that news's job is to get you to continue to doom scroll and keep your eyes there. And I'm not doing that. Thankfully, I work in an organization where news related to the work that we're doing gets to me, and I will have timed approaches in terms of what I take in, but I'm not just getting that recycled headlines that can be really traumatic to experience. But yeah, no, I'm exercising. I'm going to the theater. I'm listening to my favorite music and then getting that joy that way. And with family and kids and young people, there's joy.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah. I read a lot. I read a lot of poetry. I read books that have happy endings now. I write, you mentioned this, I write poetry. I write poetry for my staff. I write them like love poems periodically. Um, and I start every staff meeting with a poem that kind of helps where when words, linear words fail, poetry is really helpful. And music has been such a gift. I've been listening to a lot of music from that my parents used to play around the house, and it's this timeline. So it like reminds me of a different time then, and brings that back now, and I can like, future cast that there'll be another time that others are listening to that. But I saw the Amy Sherald exhibition that was at the Whitney Museum that was out of sight. I absolutely think art is so critical right now. And then it's so corny to say gratitude, but like when I left New York, I woke up, early to get on the plane, and I just like was like, thank you, New York. Thank you, hotel room that took care of me, thank you, coffee machine right here. Like I literally just am so grateful for so many things throughout the day, and it carries me.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Angelique. You remind me, for those of you who do not know, I was a professional ballerina as my first career. So art for me is always the place to go to. So yes, drop by your theater, your dance, all of your things, because they bring me and hopefully the rest of you a tremendous amount of joy. So I'm going to ask for one closing thought from each of you, which is, what advice would you give for folks in this moment? Whether that be taking some kind of action, whether it would be making a good decision, whether it be aligning with your values. But I'd love to hear what you'd like to communicate to the wonderful people we have in their last thoughts. Angelique.
I'll go because I know you're gonna crush it.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, no, but I can't wait to watch the replay of this. I'm learning a lot from you, so thank you. It's good. Two things that I would say. The first is be bolder than you're comfortable being, because this moment requires that. And then the other is what I think you said it was your son said to you. That's breathe. Um, we've had sessions for our staff and on self-care, and some of it's focused on taking intentional breaths, and what that can do to just center you and yeah, put you in the moment.
That's good. That just made me realize I need to breathe myself. I think that the first thing I'd say is like, you're not alone. I feel so grateful to even have the folks that are on this webinar as part of people that I get to sit and think with. Find your people. You are absolutely not alone. And I think the news, the headlines like raining on our phone make us feel isolated in this. You are not alone. And the second thing I'd say is that the pen is writing right now. It is writing history right now. And you get to play a part in what that is. You and your purpose get to be written into this chapter in history. And so write your chapter.
Oh, well, I could do this all day with the two of you. I just want to say, first off, thank you so much, Angelique and Rich, for your insights, your commitment, the organizations you are leading, and the work that each of you are doing. But more importantly, the calm but thoughtfulness that you're bringing to all of the decisions you're making, but also that you're standing up and being bold in this moment. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Very much.
With that, I will just say we at Raben are always delighted to host these incredible, wonderful talks with incredible leaders and are happy to do more of them. This one will be recorded, so if you want to watch it again, you are welcome to do so. But also, if you need any help with all of the things, right, whether that be strategy, strategic planning, if it's communications, even an assessment, whether that be of risk or of anything else, we are happy to help you. So please join us, reach out, but also hopefully take some solace for the rest of your Monday. Be bolder, breathe, and write your next chapter of history. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.